Is up, everybody, and welcome to a weekend edition of the All NBA podcast powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with 150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/AllNBA. I'm your host, Adam Mares. I'm joined by the man of many phones and little sleep, Marc Stein of Marc Stein Substack, as well as DLLS Mavs. Marc, I hope that was a good intro for you. I think it's accurate.
That was very good. I enjoyed that. And I live in Dallas, so even a ray of sunshine and enjoyment is welcome right now.
Yeah, well, I'm going to try to give you some. I don't know if there's anything I can provide in that realm. We're going to talk, of course, about the Dallas Mavericks. Since you're out there, it's been a couple weeks, a couple really tough weeks now, so we'll get an update on that. We're going to talk about the Cavs. We're going to talk about the Suns and where they go. What are people saying about the Suns and what the league is gearing up for and the decision the Suns make this summer with their roster. But I wanted to have you on to start and talk about some of the trades that maybe were discussed, didn't happen. And I want to start with the New York Knicks because the Knicks are a team that have had a very interesting year. Started a little bit slow, looked like they were a title contender for a while. Trade deadline comes and goes. And since then, you're starting to see them not beat the good teams in a meaningful way, like a pattern of them losing to the teams that they most need to be geared up for. And I'm just curious what you think. They're a team that made a lot of moves in the offseason, obviously, and geared up. But is this a team as currently constructed that you believe in or you think people around the league are believing in?
Well, look, are they in the tier with the Cavs and the Celtics in the East? To this point, I don't think they've proven themselves to be in that tier. I think they are at the top of the next tier.
Right.
Dangerous team with a lot of good players and a team you wouldn't necessarily be thrilled to see in the playoffs. But, I mean, you said it. The Knicks have had repeated chances against the Thunder, the Cavs, the Celtics, and haven't been able to find sustained success. And look, the main concerns with the Knicks all season have been, are they taxing their starters too much? And how much are those guys going to have left in the playoffs? But also solidifying the front line. Now, they did get Mitchell Robinson back at last. It took nearly 60 games, but Robinson is back, and he's looked promising in his return. But I think, look, the Knicks have hovered near the bottom third defensively all season. That's not where you expect a Tom Thibodeau team to be. They were 19th in defensive rating when I looked at the table before we started this recording. So, is that going to be championship level defense? And you mentioned trades that didn't happen. One of the things I heard coming out of the trade deadline was, there was a lot of talk about the Lakers and how much they would have loved to try to pry Walker Kessler away from Utah.
That's right.
As even before the Lakers got Luka Doncic, there was talk, can they get Kessler? Can they get Kessler? The Jazz repeatedly swatted away those overtures. But after the deadline, I heard the Knicks were trying just as hard. The Knicks have been interested in Walker Kessler really going back to last offseason, and Utah is just not entertaining it. Utah is, before the deadline, Utah welcomed your calls on John Collins, on Jordan Clarkson. Obviously, the Jazz also played facilitator in the Doncic trade, and they're willing to make moves around the edges. But the Jazz were pretty adamant that we're not listening. We don't want to hear your offers on Walker Kessler. And just, I think the fact that we know the Knicks tried there is just kind of, you can take that as an admission from them, an admission that they know they need more, as good as their starters are. I mean, they have, again, 4 or 5 really, really productive players, with Jalen Brunson at the front of the line. Later on tonight, hours after we record this, it's Brunson and Luka in LA. Injury has gotten in the way of that matchup a lot here in the last couple of years. So that will be good theater. But yeah, I mean, I think the Knicks know deep down that they needed more on the front line. And then the question will just be, Robinson, they're trying to keep his minutes down at the start. Can he stay on the floor and be the impact, rangy big man that they've so clearly lacked?
Yeah, and just maybe give them a new identity, because I think that's part of it, right? They have an identity that helps them beat down a lot of teams in the NBA, but we know in the playoffs in this day and age, you need to have stylistic versatility. You got to be able to win a couple different ways, and I think that's when you look at the Celtics matchup, when you look at the Cavs matchup, those are the ones that have presented problems to them, and they're going to have to go through not just one but both of them en route to the finals. So it makes sense that they would want this. I want to come back to the Knicks in a second, but I'm throwing one at you. I've covered the league long enough to know you've covered it significantly longer. But the Jazz are in a point right now where they are not going anywhere this year. They're building. And yet they're involved in these trade talks for all of their highly coveted players. And, Walker Kessler, we're talking like, when I hear that, I feel like this is the Danny Ainge special. Let me talk to everyone just to try to hear what everybody's thinking. I'm actually going to trade our guys, but I want to make it seem like it so that I know what every team and organization is thinking that might inform my moves this summer or even into next year. Is that how I should interpret this when I hear them close, or we had talks with a whole bunch of different teams? Is that how I should interpret it?
I don't think so in this case, because this is certainly not Utah initiating this stuff. Again, their rebuild is going very slowly.
Yeah.
And the last 2 years, their first 2 years under Will Hardy, crazily enough, they started 26-26 2 seasons in a row. I mean, they were a 500 team well into the season before kind of settling into the tank. This season, it has been just a flat out tank from minute one.
Yeah.
But, they do see Kessler and Lauri Markkanen as building blocks that, Lauri Markkanen, by virtue of when he signed his extension, Lauri Markkanen intentionally signed on August 7th. He was not eligible for an extension until August 6th. Had Markkanen signed on August 6th, he would have been eligible to be traded on deadline day on February 6th. By waiting that one day, Markkanen took himself out of trade talks for this season. But, you have to wonder, what's going through his mind. Lauri Markkanen is a fantastic player, but he still hasn't played in a playoff game. And so he's just signed this long-term deal in Utah. And I just wonder, from his perspective, okay, he has this amazing new contract, but how long is it going to take Utah to really make a move? And, Ainge was saying last offseason that the Jazz want to be in the business of finding more top-tier talent and making their move. And, I certainly understand being patient, but also they are not anywhere close to title contention now. Now, obviously, they're going to have a chance to get a top pick in this draft, but, Danny Ainge, I think on a lot of levels, I mean, they have an enviable situation in Utah, but yeah, they have taken a patient approach, and I mean, patience probably not enough. Yeah. Very, very patient.
Very patient. I want to go back to the Knicks now, and I'm putting you on the spot because I didn't prep you for this one, but
of course you do that.
It's my favorite thing to do. There's all these maxims in the NBA. Phil Jackson's, you got to win 40 before you lose 20. That's how you're a true contender. Top 10 defense. If you win a championship, you usually almost always have a top 10 defense. But beating good teams is also sort of one of these unwritten lines, right? And I'm just wondering if you could think off the top of your head of a team that went on to have great playoff success, make it to a finals, or win the championship, where you looked at their win profile in the regular season and it was like New York's, and because I'm asking this because I'm interested, like Denver's, where Denver has a very good record. They don't have a lot of signature wins. Can you recall a time when that was a concern for a team that ended up going on and having playoff success?
I'm sure there's a more recent example. I'm not a very top shelf encyclopedia when it comes to reciting these things with looking it up. But the one that I will vividly remember and never forget was Miami in 2006, because I was such a vocal critic of that team when Riley, you had Shaq and Wade, but remember they brought in Antoine Walker, they brought in Gary Payton, they brought in Jason Williams, and there was so much skepticism about, there's too many veterans. How are they going to keep this team happy? And that Miami team had a terrible regular season record against the top teams in the league. And I remember in those days, I used to go on the Dan Lebertard show quite a bit, and they loved calling me Heat hater. And of course, Miami went down 2-0 in the finals and comes back, wins 4 in a row against Dallas. And at the time, that was only the second comeback in NBA Finals history from 2-0 down. So
Yeah.
I will never forget that team. But like I said, has there been a more recent example in the last nearly 20 years? I would have to consult research to give you a proper answer.
And the NBA is changing in ways that I think, some historical precedent just isn't the same. I mean, the league's a little bit more flat. We do have our 3 juggernaut teams, but it does seem like there's more middle tier teams than there are typically. And so some of this historical precedent I throw out, but you look at teams like the Nuggets, you look at teams like the Timberwolves, even the teams like the Knicks, there's some teams that just don't have consistent high profile wins throughout the year in a way that would make you want to bet on them. And the Knicks fall into that category for sure. We'll have to see if they get one. But there's 20 games left for these teams to kind of get a feel-good string of wins that they can say, hey, we can do it.
I am with you. I always want one of my, you go to ESPN's NBA standings.
Yeah.
You click on the expanded tab, and it will give you record against teams 500 or better. I always look at that category. When I'm doing power rankings, I always put a great deal of emphasis on it because I'm with you. I do think it's important to take note of that.
Yeah. I also want to ask you about Bradley Beal, because obviously going into the trade deadline, he was one of the biggest names. We look at Phoenix and just where they are right now. I mean, they were struggling before the trade deadline. The trade deadline comes and passes. There's all these rumors about different trades that could happen with Kevin Durant, this or that. And it's been a disaster since then. But, was there anything that you saw with Bradley Beal or anybody else that was discussed at the deadline?
What's interesting to me there, what I included in my Around the League notes this past Sunday, the notion that Bradley Beal was completely untradeable, surprisingly, that's not exactly true. The Washington Wizards, of all teams, gave real consideration to reacquiring Bradley Beal, which I think is just a fascinating discussion topic. Now, obviously, Washington is not doing that unless they're getting draft pick sweeteners to take on Beal's money. But Beal has nearly $111 million left on his contract after this season. So the fact that Washington was even willing to entertain this, of course, the Wizards are the team that gave him that 5-year, $251 million deal with a full no trade clause. But the way it was explained to me, all the reservation was on Beal's side. Beal was not willing. This was reported all over the place for weeks leading up to the trade deadline. And Bradley Beal and his agent, Mark Bartelstein, they stuck to it. They said repeatedly, we are not waiving the no trade clause. We do not want to be traded out of Phoenix. But again, I'm looking at it from the team perspective. Right. The idea that the Wizards had serious discussions about, okay, let's see what we would get out of the deal. Let's see how much draft capital we could get if we're willing to do this. But they had real conversations internally about bringing him back. And the other interesting thing in connection with this, the way it was explained to me, there was a hope that maybe one of the things that could entice Bradley Beal to say, you know what, okay, I will come back. When Bradley Beal left the Wizards, he was only 160 points shy of the all-time franchise record for scoring.
Wow. Who holds it? Do you know off the top of your head?
The great Elvin Hayes, the big.
There you go.
So he was like 160 points away. That's only 5-6 games. Nothing. Yeah. So I think there was some hope among people who would have wanted to see this go through, that maybe Bradley Beal would be okay with coming back, gives him a chance to win kind of wrest the franchise scoring crown away. But like I said, from the Bradley Beal side of things, they were consistent and adamant. We are not waiving the no trade clause. We want to stay in Phoenix. And that's why the Suns generate so much curiosity, because if Bradley Beal sticks to that, if he does not show a willingness to waive his no trade clause, the Suns will be forced to look at other moves to retool their team. And that's why there's been so much discussion around Kevin Durant.
Well, on that discussion around Kevin Durant, to me, after the trade deadline, obviously the playoffs are coming up. That takes center stage, but we all know that right around the corner is going to be a new free agency, a new offseason, and teams rebuilding. So Phoenix, to me, is the one team. If we started and said, what's the summer look like? Line item number one would be, well, what is Phoenix going to do? What do people around the league seem to think? Is Phoenix the center of the basketball universe the next time these trade market opens up?
Well, I would say Dallas and Philly also are generating lots of this same kind of curiosity, because the Mavericks have just met with one disaster after another.
Man.
Since the decision they made.
Yeah.
Do not lose sight of that. It was Dallas's decision
to
trade Luka Doncic away. But since then, just one bad thing after another. And a lot of it has been of their own making. But obviously, the Kyrie Irving injury is, just a very sad and disastrous turn for them when, Irving has played so well and is so beloved, and, really a guy that Mavs fans see as like, he's our guy now. And to watch him sustain a season-ending knee injury the way he did, just heaped more heartache onto a fan base that was already heartbroken. And then obviously Philly, this is crazy that the Sixers and the Mavericks were supposed to be two of the teams in the championship conversation. All we talk about with either of these teams now is, can they have any lottery luck? Where are they going to end up in the lottery? Like, just, you would have never imagined that with those two teams. But you are right. The Suns are they are right there at the top of the list with the Mavs and the Sixers in terms of what next, teams trying to figure it out. And look, I think Kevin Durant has made it clear he did not want to be traded. He, the Warriors made a real play to get him, and the message was conveyed to the Warriors, don't do it. Yeah. Durant doesn't want to be traded in season. But the phone is going to ring in Phoenix for Kevin Durant this offseason, whether Durant wants to leave or not.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just a reality now. But there's been this chatter over the past week about Mike Budenholzer, which again, the fact that his job security is being questioned, is, I think it's important to say, after seeing Luka Doncic get traded in the middle of the night, there is nothing that should surprise you anymore. Like there is nothing that we can say is shocking after that. But it certainly does raise your eyebrows that Frank Vogel was given a 5-year contract, dismissed after one season. They hire Budenholzer to a 5-year contract. We're not even at the end of year one of that 5-year deal. And in coaching circles, the whispers are starting. My good friend Chris Haynes, my longtime podcast partner, he had to report last week about Budenholzer telling Devin Booker to be less vocal and how much shocked Booker. So it's like the stream of headlines that have come out of Phoenix this season. I mean, they started 8-1. I mean, who remembers that?
I do. I was liking, they were taking a lot of threes. I was kind of liking how they were playing. New coach. You're like, okay, let's see. We saw.
Yeah, it is.
It's wild. It's wild. So my assumption is, I have to imagine, let me put it this way. I would be floored if Kevin Durant was on the Suns on opening night of 2026 season, 2025-26 season. That's kind of this assumption I'm operating. And Kevin Durant, for as much as he has had successful stops and unsuccessful stops, if Kevin Durant was known to be available this summer, 20 teams that would be calling, 20, 23, 24 teams. I mean, there's only a handful of teams that maybe look at their situation and say, we don't need that, or we're not stable enough for it. But I have to imagine every team would say, Kevin Durant's available. What do we do? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, look, I think team, it depends on what kind of timeline your team is on. But certainly when, again, that's kind of what I'm saying here is like, it isn't clear yet just how available he is. But the fact that he was so openly discussed as a potential trade target at the deadline, it just guarantees that the phone is going to ring and teams are going to be checking and asking. You mentioned off the top, trades that didn't happen. Minnesota is a team in the second apron and functionally had no way to trade for Kevin Durant unless they shed salary first so they could get under the second apron and then be able to aggregate contracts. But the Wolves tried to do that. The Wolves were calling teams, trying to put 3-team scenarios together to see, was there any way that they could get in the mix and try to acquire Kevin Durant. So I think that is kind of a good indication of how wild this summer could get. That, the Suns' phone is going to ring. And, they've only won 4 games since February 1st. They have an opportunity now to move into the play-in zone. They do have an opportunity because of Dallas, the situation that the Mavs are in. I don't know that the Mavs are going to be able to, I think the Mavs are going to fall out of the top 10 in the West. But you would also have to look at it and say the Blazers have been playing much better than the Suns here in 2025. And the Blazers might have a better shot at moving into the play-in zone than the Suns do, especially when you remember the Suns awoke on this Thursday that we're recording this with the hardest remaining schedule in the league. Their opponent winning percentage entering these last, 19, 20 games or so was, almost in the 600s.
Wow.
So they're
all good teams.
A lot of work to do.
Yeah. Well, the Suns will be a fascinating one. And then there's the Devin Booker question, which again, it always would be surprised if a team tries to move off from Devin Booker. But if you just trade KD, do you build an instant contender around Booker and Beal? To me personally, I would say no. If you already have this rift or a potential rift between Budenholzer and Booker, is that a thing that's going to, heal itself? Who knows? But I just look at the Suns situation and say the NBA always surprises you with how big these deals can get. Nothing more than the Luka Doncic trade. But I look at the Phoenix Suns and just tell myself, I wouldn't be surprised if they were a whole different team and a whole different org. And by the way, I'll just ask you this one real quick, because here's my other assumption. Matt Ishbia, the latest example of new owner syndrome, comes in guns a-blazing. I wonder if the way he's made so many moves and the way those moves have played out, I just wonder if a guy as much of a gunslinger as he wants to be, aggressive as he wants to be, you have to imagine human nature tells you get a little bit more conservative when you play your hands a few times and come up empty. So I have to imagine he has to look at that and maybe lost a little appetite for risk.
Well, look, all the messaging to this point has been the Suns want to keep Devin Booker, that they don't even want to entertain the thought of trading him. But the reality that the Suns face is Houston has all of their draft capital. Yeah. So are the Rockets going to test that resolve and see after the season, like May, are they going to go to the Suns and say, you sure you don't want to trade Devin Booker and get back all these draft picks we hold that are supposed to be your picks? You have to imagine that those conversations are forthcoming and that the Suns' resolve will be tested. Yeah. But I think your initial instinct is right. The whole league is looking at Phoenix as there's going to be action in the desert this summer. I don't think there's any question about it. It's just going to be a matter of how drastic will it be.
Well, I told you we'd end with Mavs, but I kind of want to but this lends itself very nicely to talk about the Dallas Mavericks. And it's been, in my opinion, and I haven't done the research on this to really line it up. I think it'd be an interesting research project, but I think this might be the worst month franchise has ever gone through in the NBA in terms of consecutive punches to the gut. Obviously, the Luka trade started it, but all of the injuries that have followed it. And then on top of that, and I'm curious what you think, it would be one thing if all that happened to the Mavs was all of it. But the fact that the Lakers now all of a sudden look incredible with Luka Doncic, better than people projected, that has to play into the equation. So take us through what it's like in Dallas right now for yourself, for the fan base out there, and for the organization.
Yeah, it's been 30-something days, and it it gets no better. Like I certainly I wish there was a list to consult where we could say, okay, show me every franchise in any major league sport
Right.
at a stretch like this. That kind of research, unfortunately, is not available at the fingertips. But it's so interesting that you just bring, literally yesterday, I got a call from a very prominent league figure, someone who knows the terrain here in Dallas very well, who knows a lot of the people involved in the Luka trade very well. And they just called me out of the blue and just like, how could this happen? Like, what is going on here? And I'm like, listen, this is day 34, 35. I've been writing and talking about nothing else, and I still don't believe it. I still struggle to believe that a franchise that had a 25-year-old generational player who wanted to be here, who showed zero interest in leaving, that they initiated this. And you're right, to send him to the Lakers. I mean, the Lakers have a 10-year runway now that a month and change ago they couldn't have dreamed of. What was hanging over the Lakers is exactly what was hanging over the Mavericks in those last years of Dirk Nowitzki's career before they were able to acquire Luka Doncic in the 2018 draft. You have Dirk Nowitzki here for 21 years, and those last few years, the Mavericks, how on earth do you replace a Dirk Nowitzki? The Lakers were going through the same thing. How on earth do we replace LeBron James, who is at 40 playing turn back the clock basketball? And yeah, the Lakers have been, Luka hasn't even hit full stride yet. And they've been so good. They're finding a way to play elite defense even without Anthony Davis. LeBron is benefiting so much playing off Luka. I mean, I had a coach in the league say it to me today. Like, he's like, think about it. LeBron now sees the second best defender every team has because he's out there.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds simple, but that is such a great position for LeBron James to be in it. And so this is all building up to, April 9th. The Lakers are here in Dallas, April 9th. And I think I'm a nostalgist. I love my NBA history. I love to be able to cite examples of, you always ask me, when was the last time? And, I try to give you, like you asked me before, and I could talk about the 06 Heat and how bad they did in the regular season against the best teams, and it didn't matter. They won the championship. But there is nothing in my memory banks, I think, that is going to compare to when Luka is back here in a Laker uniform. I suppose you can liken it to maybe Durant playing in Oklahoma City for the first time as a Warrior, or LeBron playing in Cleveland for the first time as a Heatle. But again, in those scenarios, the player chose to leave. Luka didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
Mavs traded him away.
A whole new feeling.
And for the fans to see him come back here, there's going to be a huge outpouring of love for Luka. I mean, like, words cannot describe how beloved Luka Doncic remains in Dallas and will remain. But like, to have to see him here in Laker purple and gold, like I said, I don't know. I don't know if I have any kind of comparison for what that's going to be like.
I know for us in Denver, everybody remembers the 94 playoffs against Seattle. Denver gets the upset. It was a great year. That summer, Robert Pack blew out his knee. First week of the season, LaFonso Ellis blew out his knee, and you had a team that was climbing, and you thought, oh man, anything's possible. They just beat a 1 seed. They're going to be good. And the team was wiped out, never played together again. I've never got to see that team go. But that pales in comparison to what you're saying, which is those are acts of God. This is a self-inflicted wound, or at least it feels like a self-inflicted wound in a way that is just unfathomable. We got to cleanse the palate, man. We've had some negative conversations. We got to go to the best story right now, or at least one of the best stories, which is a team on the third 12-game winning streak of the season, which is insane. The Cleveland Cavaliers, who have not lost a game since they lost to Boston on February 4th. That's over a month, the third time. And it's funny because they just beat Boston in that great comeback win, but it is at least interesting to say when a team only has a couple losses, you look at who they lost to. And one of those losses more recently was to Boston. So what are we making of this Cleveland team? And is there anything else for them to prove? I feel like right now they have 20 games of exhibition because they've proven all that they can to this point.
Yeah, I mean, look, their regular season has been ridiculously good, but there will be doubters until they do it in the playoffs. And I think they know that. And that is just the nature of the NBA beast. It's unfair in some ways because they truly have been spectacular. You know, that you mentioned that third time with a 12-game winning streak. It's only happened in the NBA once before. The 06-07 Mavericks did it.
Oh, wow.
Remember that team, that 06-07 Mavs team started 0-4, ended up going 67-15, and lost in round one
to
Golden State. I'm not suggesting that's what's going to happen to the Cavs, but look, there is another great stat that the Cavs, they're only the 12th team in history to win 50 of their first 60 games in a season. But of the previous 11, only 6 of the 11 won it all. And so,
man,
like,
that's crazy.
It doesn't, even starting 50-10, as much as it blows you away, it doesn't guarantee anything. So the Cavs, it's going to be very interesting to see how they look in the playoffs when this is how it is in the NBA. Until we see you win. I mean, I don't have to tell you, what city do you live in? You know, the Nuggets heard this talk until they won it.
Yeah.
Well, they won it. They were routinely doubted, no matter how great Jokic is. And Cleveland is going to face the same noise, but you have to say they have been the team of the season, really, certainly in the East. I mean, Oklahoma City would have an argument, but in the East, they've been the team of the season. And they went out at the deadline and were very aggressive to bring in DeAndre Hunter to make sure they could get Javonte Green off the buyout market. And you already saw DeAndre Hunter. You saw him play very well against Jason Tatum in their first showdown. So Hunter is already helping the Cavs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Cleveland has, there is nothing left for them to prove in the regular season. They have done everything they possibly could in this regular season. They upgraded their roster and were aggressive at the deadline when they didn't have to be. They easily could have said, we're going to stand pat, and people would have understood. But no, they made a pretty aggressive trade to bring Hunter in. They had to give up Karis LeVert and George Niang, who are players that, you know, were an important part of the chemistry there. You know, they have been aggressive. They've got a great team. Kenny Atkinson is in this, you know, they started 15-0. I thought Kenny Atkinson would, you know, be able to crawl to the Coach of the Year title. JB Bickerstaff, ironically.
Yeah, knock it on the door.
He's got to be right there. I still think Atkinson's going to win.
Yeah.
Because he's been such a difference maker to Cleveland. And, you know, we started out talking about all the minutes that the Knicks play. You know, they're also doing this with keeping Donovan Mitchell's minutes down and keeping everybody's minutes down, which you have to think is going to help this team in the postseason. So it's really going to be fascinating to see what Cleveland is capable of. And yeah, I mean, they don't have to prove, except they do.
Well, here's the thing, Mark. Their last 3 games of the year are Indiana, New York, Indiana. They're almost certainly not going to try in those games. They'll be up enough. You don't want to show your hand going into the playoffs, all those types of things. So to me, the only remaining meaningful game on their schedule is this Sunday at Milwaukee. It's too early in the season to start getting too cute. You know, you're still just playing to win. It means something to Milwaukee if they can take a bite out of Cleveland. Maybe it gives them confidence. So to me, I almost feel like they are going to be at a point where they are over the competitive part of the regular season as early as this weekend. And so in a weird way, that makes the Sunday game more interesting. After that, they play a bunch of, you know, lottery teams or West Conference teams that probably don't matter. So to me, it maybe adds some intrigue to Sunday's game.
And look, I think the intrigue for me, it's on the Bucks side, because I'm still higher on Milwaukee than most.
Interesting.
I give them a puncher's chance because I think Giannis and Dame are that good. And the reality is, we haven't seen Giannis in the playoffs the last 2 years. I mean, he's either missed it entirely or barely played through injury. If the Bucks enter the playoffs with a full speed Giannis, a full speed Dame, and I like the Kuzma acquisition. I think he's helped them. I think he's versatile. I think he gives them a lot of what they didn't have. And as the third star in a trio, I think he can do a lot of things to help that team. They will get Portis back for the playoffs. Like I think Milwaukee, I think the top of the East with the Knicks, with the Bucks, with the Pacers. Like obviously all the focus is on Cleveland and Boston, but I think at least 1 through 5, there is quality in the East, at least 1 through 5.
Yeah. Well, the Cavs are a great story. I do wonder about how they're going to have to finish this year because, it's just tough to have motivation when the games don't matter. Every athlete is wired to compete, but there's human nature involved. And when the games, don't matter, they're up 8 games in the standings. They'll probably lock up the number 1 seed here in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe. And when you get to that point, it's just tough. So we'll see how they kind of finish out the string. But, Mark, thank you so much. The trade talk was very interesting. Obviously we feel for you out here. We love having you on the show, but I can only imagine what your last 35 days have been like covering the most bizarre NBA trade story of my lifetime, at least. But I appreciate you taking the time.
Always, my friend. Good to catch up.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Hit that like button for us on the way out. Hit that subscribe, and Legs and I will be back on Monday. We'll see you then.